Hi, thanks very much for letting me do this digitally and pre-recorded. I'm sorry that Elizabeth or myself can't be here today, but our emails are at the front slide and at the end. So if you do have any questions, you can do emails afterwards. I'm talking to you today about the Corbridge Glass project that we're working on, and it's an update for 2025, and we'll share the progress and some of the challenges, particularly that Elizabeth has found as she's doing most of the work, and as well as some of the successes and the new finds. And I will just say that 90% of this work is Elizabeth, as is the PowerPoint. So just a quick overview. Corbridge Roman Site is up here in the northeast of England, not far from Hexham, between Hexham and Newcastle. It's got a foundation date of late 1st century AD, so before Hadrian's Wall, and it's on a real strategic location of Deer Street, which is a street that goes north-south from York all the way through Yorkshire up through into Hadrian's Wall and further north, and then also the Stane Gate, which is this east-west road that you see here, which joins Corbridge to Carlisle and the sites in between. It's been excavated between 1906 and 1981 with various periods of more intensive activity, and has produced a huge finds assemblage, as you would expect from a Roman site up on the frontier. One of the really famous examples of the objects found is this image on the right, the Corbridge hoard, which was a chest filled with armour, weapons, tools, and other things. But the collection is much more than just the Corbridge hoard. Now, the project that we're talking about today is the glass from Corbridge, and there you might think, well, it's already been published, why do we need to look at it? But that's not the case. There's 3 publications which contain glass. So the first one by William Bulmer in 1955. He was the honorary curator of the Corbridge Museum between 1937 and 69, so he was well placed to know what the material was. His paper provided an overview of the glass vessels and did specifically mention a few examples from Corbridge, but he doesn't provide a catalogue, and there's no sort of quantification. It's just a general statement of what sort of things are at Corbridge and how many examples there might be. And the paper in the middle, Dorothy Charlesworth, who many people will have heard of, she published a paper in 1959 on Roman glass in northern Britain, which included some specific examples from Corbridge, but there's no full catalogue. But what's quite useful is some of the specific pieces have been illustrated, so we are trying to work out if we can link those back up. And then the big report that people might know about Corbridge is the 1988 monograph, which covers the excavations between 1947 and 1980, and Denise Allen was asked to do the glass report in that work. She analysed about 700 fragments of glass and suggested that it mostly represents the later 1st and 2nd centuries, with only a couple of exceptions. And she noted there was a high percentage of bottles, nearly 60%, but that overall the assemblage was typical of the period. But we think that Denise wasn't shown all of the glass, because we've found more pieces in the store from the 1947 to 80 excavations that don't seem to have been seen by her looking at her report. So what is the project? The project really got going properly in 2022, and we wanted to catalogue all the glass in the Corbridge collection, so from all the excavations. The museum database listed 3,500 fragments, or 3,500 records, which we knew represented more fragments because some records were for a whole bag or for multiple pieces. And in 2023, Elizabeth carried out an audit and gave us an estimate of 6,200 fragments. Now, those numbers are quite big when you think that Denise, for the 1988 excavation report, was only shown 700, and makes you realise quite how little we really do probably know and has been looked at from the material. And glass is so important to tell us about, so many different aspects of life, so it was decided it was important. So what we want to do is record all the glass from Corbridge, including vessel and window. We're repackaging all the glass as well, so it's cared for the future. The data at the end of the project will be made available on the ADS. The collection will be published, and hopefully we'll be able to do a temporary exhibition. And we've been really lucky in that we've been able to find funds for this work from private donors, book sales. The Association of Roman Archaeology also gave us a grant, because all of these things, cost money, and we want to pay Elizabeth for her time fairly. So how are we getting on? So these numbers are from the 11th of March 2025, hot off the press from Elizabeth's database. She's recorded almost 5,500 fragments, so not far based on her audit estimate, not many left to go. And this table here includes everything that's in the Corbridge Museum. And we found out recently that the Great North Museum actually has quite a lot of material from Corbridge that we didn't realise. And Elizabeth's wants to have a look at it, and thanks so much to Joe at the Great North Museum for allowing that access. And in Elizabeth's first visit, she found 3 beads, 104 vessel fragments and 29 window glass fragments, but she says there are a lot more window glass pieces to record. Most of the material that's at the Great North Museum, that's based in Newcastle, seems to be from the Red House excavation, which is the earliest fort, so actually potentially super exciting, because if that material hasn't been looked at, it's really significant for looking at glass, in the late 70s, early 80s up in the northern frontier. And you can see there the counts, so vessel is obviously by far the largest, but we've got a glass hairpin, which was a wonderful discovery by one of our volunteers just within a box of pot. Fair few beads, bangles, but we know most of the beads and bangles she hasn't looked at yet, so those numbers will go up quite a lot, as well as some evidence for glass working. And Elizabeth has kindly broken this down into a table to give people an idea of what sorts of things she's finding as she's going through. So she wants to just make sure, recording identification is still in progress. So totals are likely to change, but she feels that we're so far along the project now that the broad patterns will probably stay the same. So you can see that bottle is by far the most well represented category, but also a fair number of beakers, cups and jugs. And the flask and unguentaria actually are not tiny, but she does say there's quite a lot of pieces where it's a base fragment and it could have been a jug, it could have been a jar, and so she's had to sort of make some decisions just to put them in. And going back to the bottles, we've got nearly 2,500 fragments of bottles, 2 nice examples on the right there. There's 222 base fragments with moulded designs, some of which are quite unusual. And I know Elizabeth has been in touch with Hilary Cool about a couple in particular that we think might be rare or even maybe unique. There's fewer fragments of other storage vessels, but there's quite a lot from jars, and the number of fragments from jugs is higher than the cups and beakers, but she thinks that's because it's easy to identify a jug from the handle, whereas there's other body vessel fragments which could be from a type of vessel and you can't identify that, so that's a bit of a bias. She says also we've got not very many fragments of bowls, and we might expect a bit more, so it's maybe they've not come to it, but there's a small number of pillar molded bowls which are blue-green, and they're all late 1st to early 2nd century. And as we said, once the recording's finished, she wants to go back because Cool and Baxter suggested that assemblages from late 1st to mid 2nd century context at military sites, which Corbridge is in that period, tend to be characterised by bottles and bowls, whereas civilian sites tend to have a high proportion of jugs and drinking vessels. And so Corbridge is that real weird mixture, whereas it's mostly military until about the 160s, and then it changed to more civilian, but still within the military zone. So it'd be really interesting to see what our makeup is, considering we're a bit of a hybrid site. At the moment, we're not doing anything looking at stratified deposits and spatial analysis, but that will come. And if anyone wants the reference, the Cool and Baxter article is Peeling the Onion, an approach to comparing vessel glass assemblages, and it's in JRA 1999. So next, looking at the colours, there's very few examples of polychrome glass, but that's to be expected because it was only really popular up until the time of the conquest. But there is one fragment which is from a cast mosaic vessel, which is made from translucent green glass with threads of opaque yellow and occasional strands of opaque red, but it's super, super tiny, so that's why we haven't included a picture. But we are getting an increasing group of strongly coloured vessel glass, which is really nice to see. It was popular up until the end of the 1st century, although the yellow-brown / yellow-green was used for a little longer, and we do get yellow-green in late Roman. The colourless glass, which you can see there in the middle, we've got 593 sherds. That was produced in large quantities from the end of the 1st century, so there's quite a large number from Corbridge, which makes sense when you think of the period of occupation. They're mainly from cups and beakers, but there's also a small number of jugs and bottles, so nothing too unusual there. And then Elizabeth just picked out a few bits that she thinks are nice for people to look at and interesting. So these two are fragments of stemmed foot beakers, and they're mid-2nd to early 3rd century. And on the left is one that's extremely delicate, that sort of blue-green, whereas the one on the right, it's colourless and it's much thicker. So you can see the variation in forms, even though they're supposed the same sort of thing. And then also two bases here made from dark glass, which appears to be black, but when Elizabeth shone a bright light through it, she can just about tell that it's translucent. We got very excited because we thought these might actually be black glass, which is super rare. And from what she can see, it seems to be very, very dark yellow-green. And it's the base and part of the lower body, but they're similar in some ways, but they've actually been made in different ways. The one on the left has a tubular base ring, whilst the one on the right has an applied whole base pad. We're still looking out for a bit of black glass. We've not given up. And then talking about cups, so there's many fragments from cylindrical cups, and they're pretty common. We have one fragment that's painted. It's not quite as good as the Vindelander example with the gladiators, where they've been able to piece lots of it back together, but this is a large cat, so perhaps from a similar sort of scene of gladiatorial animal combat. But so far, out of all of these cylindrical cups, there's only one example, which is a convex cup with a pinched decoration, which is what you can see on the left here. And it's because it's much more difficult to identify unless fragments with the decoration, as you can see there. We first thought this might be a vessel in the shape of a fish, which we were super excited about, and that's the fin, but it's not. It's a convex cup with pinched decoration. And then moving on to the window glass, and we had a really wonderful talk by Denise Allen about window glass when we had the RFG conference in Nottingham, which was talking about how the glass is made and how you can spot it, and that's really, really helped Elizabeth with this, and also given us some targets of things we'd love to find. And so far, Elizabeth has recorded 643 fragments of window glass, and it weighs about 6.5 kilograms, and what she's doing is recording the square centimeters by tracing the fragment, and then she puts that into the computer to give us centimeters squared, which gives you an idea of how big a window sort of it could cover. And in total, she's recorded 6,117 square centimeters of window glass, which obviously from lots and lots of windows. And she says most of the fragments are matte glossy window panes, which is most typical of the 1st to 3rd century, but there are a very small number, if you look at the differences, of the blown sort of double glossy window glass, which was first introduced in the 2nd century but adopted more widely after 300. And there's a publication, Foy and Fontaine, from 2008, where they've looked at the size of window panes, from the smallest being 25 by 19 centimeters and the largest 80 by 80. So she's had a look at, what would that make? What would the amount of glass we've got left make? So far, the matte glossy fragments equates to nearly 13 of these smallest panes and almost one of the largest panes, but all the pieces are from mostly different panes because of the different colours, the different thicknesses, and we do have, although the vast majority are the standard sort of blue-green, there are some that are light green, some colourless, some yellow tinged colourless, and some yellow-green. And what's going to be really interesting when we start to do the spatial analysis is if we can start to see discrete areas where there's more window glass found or not. And one success story that Elizabeth really wanted to share, we're working on a legacy project here. Some of this glass was excavated, 120 years ago almost, and there's been varying levels of documentation. But what we've done, and we do this with everything at Corbridge, we're working a lot on the pottery as well, is we record everything that's written on that sherd or that of pot or that fragment of glass. And so here you can see on the left 2 pieces that have got a sticker on with a number. Sometimes the context number is written directly on ink, and there's a variety of different stickers that were used, and we knew they must mean something, we just hadn't worked out what. But Elizabeth started to make a note of all these so she could go back, and she realised that it might have been part of a catalogue that someone was creating. And then some of them, she noticed, if you see this one here that's circled, is an 18 and then an equal sign. And she recorded these two fragments stored in separate bags with different accession numbers, not linked at all. And she realised, because she'd been recording the sticker numbers, it came up, she said, oh, I've already got that. So she got the second or the first piece out when she was recording the second one, and they joined together. So at some point, we know there's been people working on this material, and then their work has not been completed, or it's been mixed up because these two pieces got completely separated, whereas at one point someone knew they joined. So that's why we're recording everything, and we are hoping that we'll be able to unpick, or I suppose the other opposite way, put back together some things that have maybe been separated in later cataloguing. So just to finish up, there's still quite a lot to do. Elizabeth's hoping to get the initial recording phase of the project done by the end of April. We're almost there with the repacking.